This is a Balanced Brain podcast with your hosts, Melanie Nicholson and Sean Clift.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Balanced Brain podcast. My name's Sean Clift and I'm joined by my very good friend and co-host Melanie Nicholson. Melanie, how are you going?
I'm great, thanks, Sean. How are you going?
Yeah, pretty good. I know you're still in lockdown there in Newcastle, must be tough for you down there.
Yeah, but the podcast is saving me. It gives me something, a creative outlet, so it's good.
Well, that's great. Well, we got a fantastic episode today. We've got some very good friends of mine joining me out here at the beautiful Mount Pleasant, which is about an hour drive northwest of Brisbane, in a little country area out here. And I'm joined by two of my very good friends, Sabrina Laurie and Ben Kurzweil. Sabrina, Ben, welcome to the Balanced Brain podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Welcome, Ben and Sabrina.
Hello.
So I've known Sabrina for, Sabrina, how long? It must be 15 years.
Oh, yeah.
Be pretty close to that.
Yeah. Well, I think, I don't even know how long.
It's been a long time. Sabrina and I have done a lot of work together over the years on Sabrina's music project, Sabrina Laurie. Ben is Sabrina's partner. Ben and I have known each other for a couple of years now. And Ben was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer, glioblastoma. Have I said that right?
That's right.
About 2 years ago. So Ben, starting off, how are you feeling?
Feeling all right. I at the moment got the new plan, and it's going pretty good. I'm feeling pretty good at the moment.
Great. Look, before we get started, I want to ask you about something really interesting, which is word finding. Can you tell us what word finding is and how it's affecting things?
Yeah, that's interesting thing is that prior to this brain cancer thing, I was very well known as someone who could talk very well, and I had all these huge big words, and I was very, very good at it. And it so happens that the exact part of the brain that the initial thing hit is actually called the word finding part of the brain. So it's
like
funny.
The left frontal lobe. But Ben will say it, but Ben still uses words that I don't even know what they mean. Somehow you can still pull some crazy words out of your head.
Well, in a big coincidence, that's where I had my brain injury as well, a hit to the frontal lobe, and I had the word finding thing. And I was deeply passionate, obviously still am, about words too. So that was a big thing as well. But I also had, my brother and sister used to say, but you can still find words that we can't find. But, I found it really interesting too, Ben. Like, the word finding was a massive thing. And I'd come out with, weird words when I was supposed to say other things. And I didn't know that I'd said them until they came out.
Yeah, I thought we'd just mention that straight up at the start of the podcast because, Ben sometimes will struggle to find the right words, and so Sabrina will have to help out. Is that the way it's really going to play out for you guys, isn't it, at times?
Yes, word finding. That is exactly it.
All right, let's go back to the start. What happened 2 years ago? How did you find out? How did it all come about?
Yeah, so me and Sabrina here decided to go to the hospital. I'll tell the first part, and Sabrina will be able to tell the full story far cogently than me.
See that? What's that word? Cogently.
There we go, cogent. But suffice to say, we ended up in the hospital because a doctor thought he saw something in my mood and my talking one day and said, "You better go into the hospital." And off I went, and they found all this stuff. You tell the story.
Yeah, they did. They found something. So we thought Ben had a cold, like a really bad cold. And then he took a couple of days off work, and then on about the third or fourth day he started vomiting, and he had to drive me to an appointment because I wasn't allowed to drive after getting an operation that day. And halfway to the appointment, he just had to pull over and start vomiting on the side of the road, and it was just really weird. And so after my appointment, I said, I'm taking you to the doctor, much against Ben's will. He just wanted to ride it out. We just thought it would get better and thought maybe the doctor would give us some pain medication and sleepy medication, get over it. But in the waiting room, Ben forgot his middle name, which was really unusual. It was a bit of a red flag, and the doctor tested a couple of other things and sent him straight to emergency, and they took him straight in, and in an initial CAT scan they found a mass and came back to us and said, we have found some, what do they call it? A lesion, which was really hugely shocking to both of us in that moment.
It certainly was.
And then so they had to do a further scan, an MRI, so they could see a little deeper, and that revealed the size of it and that it was of great concern to them. And at that point, we just knew that there was growth in his brain that they had to operate on urgently.
And that all happened in that night?
That all happened within 4 hours.
Wow.
Of getting to emergency from that morning being at home, taking me to an appointment. And they told us they needed to operate straight away. And, so it was state of origin here in Brisbane that night. And a lot of emergencies were coming in around Brisbane, people that had critical conditions that needed urgent care. So they had to push the operation back to the next morning. So Ben stayed in overnight waiting for this operation and dealing with the onset of the effects of the tumour that it was having on his own there. The hospital was
It must have been a completely intense experience for that first night. How did you cope with that, and what were you feeling at the time?
They did sort of sleep me up a little bit, which was good. The whole experience of waiting for some kind of diagnosis, I remember just sort of me and Sab sitting there, and at the time Sabrina had quite a lot going with her back, and so I was doing a lot of help dealing with her issues, and then all of a sudden it turns around and I become quite sick. So I'm just trying to read the whole thing as it was happening, and what can I say? It was interesting.
So then that night, like when you had to wait for the operation the next morning, like I know that they'd given you sleep and pain medication, but what was going through your mind? Like before you knew actually what was really the diagnosis? Like how was that night in hospital waiting for that?
That night in hospital was certainly feeling quite sick. They gave me a couple of different sort of pills that would sleep me. So I was getting very sleepy, and just sort of woke up. And the main thing I do remember is feeling quite relaxed actually about the whole process of getting put into the actual thing where they take a little bit of the
operating room.
Yeah.
You were pretty relaxed when they wheeled you off to have the surgery. You were kind of you were cracking jokes.
Yeah.
I was like, he's been given a lot of drugs.
So what happened then? So the surgery was the next day?
Yeah, so the surgery was the next day, and yeah, of course, don't remember any of that at all. I was gone, and yeah, when I woke up, yeah, pretty tired.
Do you remember when you woke up at the hospital after the surgery? And do you remember that?
Very vaguely. I have this memory of one of them like had to like shout at me something.
Yeah, because you kept wanting to stand up to. You just kept wanting to rip off all the medical stuff that was stuck to you, and the cat. You're like, I just want to get up and go to the toilet by myself because you couldn't do that. And but when you first woke up, your family were all around you in the bed. Everyone had come to see you and see if you were okay, and that was actually really emotional, but also really funny as well. It's weird.
Was that?
Yes, because it was so soon after the operation, and with the swelling from the operation, and because they'd told us and warned us that you would have a period straight after the operation where your brain was swollen so much you wouldn't be able to remember properly and use words properly, which was quite alarming and quite funny at the same time, because some of the things you said, I can't remember exactly what you were saying, but your brother was playing with you about it, like asking you things because your responses were so funny. Yeah.
I can't even remember that. No, can't remember that at all.
So how long did it take to recover from that operation? Was there pain, or was there some side effects after that, or how did it sort of affect you in the immediate term after that initial operation?
So as Sabrina was sort of mentioning, the initial word finding issues that started immediately were pretty a lot worse than today, put it that way. And the weird thing about this whole word finding thing is that if I could explain this to people, if I'm just not talking, but I'm just having a conversation with myself in my head, I'm like perfect. I can find all the words, and everything's just completely and utterly normal. As soon as you literally have to find the actual word, that's the difficult thing. That's why it's called word finding. But where were we at?
We were at the Royal Brisbane Hospital, and so every time they come around to do the observations, like every 2 hours or whatever, they will ask Ben, and so beside the bed where he was, they would ask him where he was and what the date was, who the Prime Minister is, that kind of thing. And it took quite a few days before you could recall that stuff.
Yeah, there was one particular sort of thing. Do you remember that was? If I could remember this particular one little sentence, then I could.
Oh yeah, that's how we started doing
to remember this.
The rewiring of the brain. We're like, okay, we're going to get this next time. I'm like, okay, let's just try to remember this, the start of it. They're going to ask you, where are you? And if Ben could remember to where he was, we go, the Royal Brisbane Hospital, the Royal Brisbane Hospital. If he could remember that himself, then the rest would flow after it. It started becoming like little exercises that we were doing in the hospital, because I suppose the sooner that he could figure that stuff out, the sooner we could get the hell out of there.
So, Sabrina, I've known you for a very long time,
Yeah.
And if I could guess correctly, I bet you went straight into research and what you were going to do about this. So what happened?
Yeah.
How'd you go?
Yeah, it was pretty wild. Those first few weeks were basically research, just, you know. And I remember the first thing I looked up on the internet, when the doctor said to us a few days after Ben was recovering, because they had to do a biopsy. So we didn't know for like 4 days after the operation that it was glioblastoma. And that day he said to us, now, don't go home and Google glioblastoma and sit there looking at all the results that come up when you Google glioblastoma. And of course, I went home, I Googled glioblastoma and started reading 5 minutes. And then I watched one video of a woman with her partner who had just passed away. And she'd posted this photo of her with him like a few days before he passed. And I just looked at that photo and the image immediately struck an emotion of like devastation and distress in me. And I immediately went, no, I am not going to allow myself to go down that road of that energy and that vibration. And I didn't look at any more things about glioblastoma after that, other than I switched my research and my searching on the internet to survival stories and clinical research and data in other countries I found. So we were lucky to have the drummer in my band, his wife worked in the medical industry in America, and she was familiar with glioblastoma and had access to some clinical trials that they'd done with things like broccoli sprouts and sulforaphane, which is what happens when you chew broccoli sprouts or any cruciferous vegetable. That helps cross the blood-brain barrier, which is part of the reason this cancer is so difficult to treat, because a lot of the drugs don't cross the barrier. Anyway, she sent us a bunch of stuff and that got us on our way. And then, you know, a week or two after getting home, there's no more time to do any research. And so I would ask anyone that asked us how they could help. I started asking anyone that asked, you can do some research, please help us do some research, please help us do some research.
Yeah.
And so people started sending me their research. And that was how we kind of formed our own approach to healing and what to do, because the traditional mechanism of the hospital path, you know, they deal in acute care. So there's a tumour, we take it out, here's what you can do. Go home, live your best life, eat from the food pyramid. We'll see you soon to start radiation and chemotherapy. And, you know, you specifically ask if there's any sort of supportive foods or specific things we could do that would help. And they can't give you any support or answers for that. So it was really our network of support and just believing that that is not what's going to happen with Ben. You know?
Yeah, I think that belief's really important. And so what else other than diet, what other things did you look at? Like, what were you reading about that you tried and were happy with the results?
Well, yeah, music is one of the biggest things, because that's a good way to sort of explain to people what it's kind of like, because we talked about the word finding thing, but it's called word finding. There's a whole bunch of like complicated things about, say, setting up how we record the music and everything that's totally and utterly unaffected.
Yeah, so Ben is a producer, so he's you know been recording with Pro Tools, and for anyone that isn't a musician or works in the industry, that's a digital program. where you program music on the computer and record. And so I know that one of Ben's greatest fears coming out of that operation was that he would have maybe lost some of the capacity to be able to record and use the computer in that way. And I distinctly remember the day you sat down, which was a good couple of days after you'd gotten home from the hospital. You were waiting because you were nervous about whether you could or not, and it would have been completely devastating if you couldn't. And luckily, it came back. I remember at first there was some black holes and some blank places.
Yeah.
That, where do I go? How do I save this? How does I press record? Wait on. But once you sat back for a second and really reached for it in your mind, you found it.
Yeah, there are many experiences, many aspects of this experience that if people could experience it, you know, how, like, for example, if I could explain my experience of what Sab was describing, it's almost too hard to explain what it's like to experience it.
Well, Ben, I know that music for you is a massive part of your life. It must have been quite frightening to think that you may not be able to do it. So it must have been a massive relief when you started to, you know, train your brain again to start working on the computer and start working with instruments again. And that must have been a bit of a healing process in itself, to know that your brain could start, you know, firing back into those areas.
Definitely. Like the exact moment that Sabrina was just mentioning about was where I actually learned or realized that what actually happens is that you, in your mind, you imagine something you're trying to learn that used to be, you used to just know it. And it was an initial fear that you try things and then you couldn't remember things. But the exact moment that Sabrina was sort of mentioning was the day where I actually, instead of being worried that I'd lost a skill, I could actually, one by one, just rebuild them. And so it's like a memory that wasn't there, but could so easily be replaced. It's a interesting
Well, that was a
thing.
powerful tool in itself, because in realizing that gave you a little bit of hope to believe that you could take steps to overcome what you were dealing with. And I suppose believe a bit more. I mean, some of the other things we were doing, and it was also relative to music, where every night we would listen to different frequencies of sound. And I know a lot of people these days are listening to binaural beats and other frequencies like that. So we were listening to frequencies that activate the pineal gland, and frequencies for healing in 432 hertz. And we listen to a lot of 432 hertz, actually.
Isn't that's the perfect hertz? Like, because I've looked into that myself, and that's like the healing, like that's the perfect level of healing, 432, and that's what music is satisfied. Is that's what I've looked into it and done the beats.
That's right. Yeah. And so we would just try and find the pure tone, because a lot of the things you look up on YouTube can have like all music going on as well. But if you can find just the frequency on its own, it's really annoying at first. It's just like just like a sing. But if you leave it on for an extended period, it sort of disappears. And the frequency starts, you kind of just start resonating with it, and it starts working with you. Yeah. So that was a really big part of what we were doing, getting up earlier. And we were going for walks in nature every day, making sure for at least an hour every day to go into nature and go for a walk, just connect with that energy as well. And a lot of diet stuff, even the water we were drinking.
Yeah, well, can you elaborate on that? I just came over this evening. You showed me your reverse osmosis filtration system. So what's some of those things around diet and water that you found really important?
Definitely water was a primary thing. So we've learnt a lot more now in the 2 years that that Ben has been living with glioblastoma. We moved to the bush as soon as we could find a place so that we could be on rainwater instead of town water. And we had an alkaline filtration system that we were using. And it's only recently, Ben, in the last 3 months, actually, the tumour has resurged. And we have been bombarded with a whole new modality of other supportive healing that we didn't have our heads across until now. We've tapped into a network of people, which is amazing. So we've got a reverse osmosis filter just put onto the house this week, which luckily for me, my sister and her husband own a water filtration company. Most people couldn't afford to just go and drop a few grand on a reverse osmosis filter, and they've gifted that to us. So we are so grateful. And yeah, it's pretty amazing. So rainwater and reverse osmosis. We also eat all organic, and we were mostly just plant-based. And recently, with the new progression that's happening, we've been working with a supportive oncologist doing some integrative therapy. And so Ben has just started on a keto diet where they want him to do hardcore keto for 2 months on, 1 month off, 2 months on, 1 month off, to trigger the cancer cells into confusion.
Okay.
So because the brain cells feed on sugars, the keto diet takes away those sugars, and the brain has a backup plan. So the brain cells go, oh, there's no sugars, there's fats though. It switches to feed off the fats. But the cancer cells theoretically aren't wired that way, and they get confused. And so the concept is tricking them and tricking them back and tricking them, and at the same time bombarding them with a whole range of other supportive therapies that we're doing, which do you want to talk about some of those, Benny?
Well, one thing that I thought a lot of people would find interesting or funny, or even a similar experience, was prior to this, we had taken pretty much most of meat from our diet. So all of a sudden, I'm being told we have to eat. I have to eat a certain amount of meat, which is really very, very, very strange. Having got to the point of sort of being one of those anti-meat.
Well, we kind of made choices to not eat meat to support how we feel about our contribution to the state of the climate and the planet, and our own how we feel when we eat less meat. But as I mentioned, just in recent months, there's been a resurgence of the tumour. So we are calling this sort of radical action. So if this is what this supportive therapist suggests to us, and she's got other clients that have the same thing as Ben that have been surviving it, then we are giving that a bloody go. Yeah. and it's pretty fun. we had lamb chops tonight for the first time in 2 years.
Yes, that is the number one feeling of food. Whether you're for meat or against meat, there's one thing. It just tastes really good.
And then what about some other thing, like we're seeing a lot more around medicinal marijuana, and it's big over in the US using it for that. Have you guys tried that?
Yeah,
Or what?
well, it's a huge part of, there is enormous amounts of research and evidence for this GBM. They also call glioblastoma GBM, so I might refer to it as that, for THC and CBD. And we found our own road to that in the very beginning. We had 1 week between him getting diagnosed and the radiation starting. And back 2 years ago in Brisbane in Australia, the landscape of legal avenues to get our hands on it within a week for the kind of cancer that Ben had wasn't going to happen. And we're like, this is life and death, life or death. We're going to do whatever the hell we can to find what we need. And again, our friend who worked in the American medical industry gave us some research papers about this particular cancer, what ratios of THC to CBD you would need, and the different strains and how to use it in conjunction with radiation specifically, and in conjunction with chemotherapy. So we, in Southeast Queensland, all around Australia, a lot of people get their cannabis medicine from Nimbin. And there's a, what would you call it? A lot of people can say there's been a stigma around Nimbin and marijuana for a long time, but things are changing and they are bringing in some of the highest grade medicinal medicine. There are children, there are old people, there are people with cancer coming in and out of that place for medicine that they need, that's keeping them alive, keeping their cancers at bay, and keeping them away from pain, from being in pain. People do not need to suffer as much as they do with access to this incredible plant medicine. And we are going to tell you something that's quite vulnerable for us, and that we actually ran out of one of the medicines that Ben has been using for 2 years. With COVID, when the borders closed, you can order your medicine in the mail, and we were really nervous about that because it's illegal and you have to send money, and it was scary, so we didn't. And we thought we would wait, and we feel like that missing that medicine when we did, feel like that has contributed to the resurgence of the tumour. And one thing that we're really grateful now is we just went, bugger it, let's send it. We have to get this now. Let's just send the money, and it came. And so we're back on the program. We're lucky enough to speak with somebody whose wife was riddled with cancers, all different kinds of cancers actually, not specifically brain cancer, but there is huge evidence for GBM. And she is an advocate now, and he was able to guide us in how Ben should take this medicine specific to his cancer. And happy to say you're up to 10 drops a day, which was the goal. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And theoretically, the THC and the 3 different cannabinoid receptors in the brain, with the mix of the THC at this level with CBD, causes the cancer cells to go into a state of apoptosis, which is where they commit suicide. So that, paired with Ben's doing oxygen hyperbaric machine at the moment, he's getting vitamin C injection therapy. He's getting TBM, which is total body modification. He's getting up, exercising every day. We're doing yoga. We're kind of a whole modality of different things under like a forest of healing, rather than just trying to deal with one thing, which is a tree, which is the cancer. It's so much more than that. And it's given us an insight into deeper healing more than just a cancer.
Yeah. I mean, we could go on and on and on, couldn't we, about all the things that we've learned.
We could. And we hope that if anybody else out there is on a glioblastoma journey, we are open to talking as well.
Well, absolutely.
If anybody wants to reach out to you guys and
we'll
put them in touch with us.
Get some links to.
Because we wouldn't know half the things we've found out if it wasn't for other people talking one person to another person. You know, it's not out there in the news and mainstream information for everybody. The doctors aren't telling you what to do. It's finding your own journey to your own healing, and sharing your experience really gave us so much.
Yeah, and like in Australia, in Australia's form of hospital medicinal sort of stuff, when you're really sick or something's going on, then we have this lucky situation, unlike a lot of countries where we don't have to spend a lot of money, and we have this beautiful system that helps us with all our ailments and everything. But as well, that is quite a stressed and imperfect system. So that's a really interesting thing to have learned, is that all these incredible people that are doing all this wonderful work in this Australian system that we have, which is so amazing that we don't have to spend all this money for the
operations,
for what they do. But as well, there are, like, for example, the THC. Why? It just beggars belief that there's so many places around the world that are accepting this as something very helpful, and not for people just in my situation, in many different ways.
And we do have to pay respects to the changes that have happened in this country. It's great to see that you can now go and approach a GP,
correct,
and find your pathway to a legal supply of cannabis medicine. But I think some of the GPs don't have the long-term experience with it that helps to give the right kinds of dosages. But it is great to see that change is happening.
So, guys, it's been obviously a very emotional journey over the last couple of years. I'd like to talk about how you've handled things on a more sort of spiritual level. How have you handled the emotions? So I know you guys are really big into meditation. Melanie and I are very big advocates of meditation. In fact, our last episode was dedicated just to meditation. What's your guys' approach to meditation? If you can give us some ideas on what your thoughts are for meditation, how you go about it, what some methods you use, and if people that are listening are starting their own journey on meditation, what advice would you give them?
I think, first of all, one really poignant point is Ben and I respond to different forms of meditation. So I might go, I usually do my own meditation at night before I go to bed, in my own personal space in my head, or I'm a really fast-paced person. So even me just driving for an hour I can put myself into a meditative state while I'm doing things. I'm being mindful to be more present. Whereas for Ben, he has a different way of reaching that mindful meditative state, which is you've developed a kind of a habit now where you've been listening to Dr. Joe Dispenza, and you started out with the 20-minute morning meditations.
I've done that one myself quite a few times. It's very good.
It's really great. I love it. And sort of putting a bit more emphasis on starting and ending the day in the energy of gratitude, and so sort of waking up and trying to, instead of grab for the phone to look at the time and start scrolling through social media, to stop and take a deep breath and think about a bunch of things you're grateful for consciously, and then get up. And then at the end of the day, refer back to what those feelings of gratitude were, and reconnect with that energy again, and do some deep breathing before sleep. And you'll put Ben likes to go to bed to the sound of rain, so he's found on YouTube the sound of rain, and puts that on, and that's kind of a form of meditation as well. And we often go for walks in the morning, and a couple of days a week we live not far from a four-wheel drive track up into the Diagula Ranges at the end of our street here. So we drive up there, park the car on the way, and then get out and start walking. And a couple of times we'll just sit on the mountain and pull out a Joe Dispenza and do 20 minutes meditating in the middle of a walk. And he's even got a walking meditation. We tried that.
Yeah. So you guys, heavily into music, and me, I'm a musician as well, and I find that sometimes even playing music, you get into a meditative state, because you're kind of in the present, but you really need to be focusing on what other musicians do, and then your sort of brain switches into that automatic mode. Let's talk about the music. It's a big part of your lives. You guys have got a duo together, BAST N MOVE. Let's talk about that. Who's BAST? Who's MOVE?
I BAST, based on the Egyptian cat goddess. And that came about when I was a solo artist. I was a rock musician, and I wanted to find a way to release some of the hip hop songs I was writing behind the scenes at home. And I was talking to my auntie one day, and she's talking to me about cats. Like, Sabrina, you got to do something people will want to watch. She's like, everyone loves cats. They love watching cats. I'm like, yeah, well, I can't call myself cat or pussy cat. Or anyway, she's like, BAST, just call yourself BAST. And I was going for that name for a while, about a year or two. And then Ben and I started writing songs together again after many, many years. And you came up with the idea of MOVE. I'm like, we can be BAST and something. You just think about what you want to be. And it took a while, and you landed on MOVE.
Why MOVE, Ben?
The funny thing is that it really is just descriptive of the word. I can't explain it other than you're trying to envisage yourself, making a step upon to another, from one place to the next, and that is from no riff into a new riff, no song into a new song. MOVE. It's very descriptive.
And it was at a time that you were really digging to try and get yourself some motivation, because it hasn't been 2 years of all roses and lollipops. There's been some really deep dives, peaks and troughs. And, when you go into those dark, hard moments where we're just trying to get through and things are really challenging, you're not really reaching out to people. And a lot of people don't know that's happening because you're just like in it. And I think I remember it was coming out of the end of like a bit of a run, couple of months of really challenging stuff. And you stumbled upon a motivation for yourself to overcome whatever darkness was happening by moving. I remember you were talking about you got to get up and I've got to move and just move through this and move forward.
Yeah. And then a friend of ours, Craig, gave us the idea of making not and, but N in the middle. And it became BAST N MOVE.
So, guys, you guys are professional musicians and producers, and you've got your own studio. So, obviously, making music's part of your life. It's your occupation. But tell me about the spiritual side of music. How's it been a healing journey for you?
Yeah, to my mind, it had always centered around this concept that a musical idea or concept, it's not real, it's just some thing, but to what it feels like to me is that as soon as that music or idea is sort of born somewhere, then it's kind of infecting you until you actually get it out.
It's like, I remember listening to the author who wrote Love, Eat, Pray. Is that it?
Yeah, Elizabeth Gilbert.
Love.
Yeah.
She was like, I really resonated with what she had to say about an idea, right? And creating an idea. And she said she would it was as if she was running through the fields and an idea would just like be coming from over here and she'd collide with it. And then all of a sudden it was in her and go through her. And like creativity, it's, when you, and there's something that really resonated in that for me. And I think for us dealing with this experience and having music as a vessel to express the emotions that can't be really expressed in conversation with other people. Some of the emotions are just so dense that you don't want to put that onto anybody else. And so instead of us just carrying it, I suppose the music became the vessel for just a way to release such intense emotions.
Yeah, and it's another way of seeing as well the difference between people and how people think, because I try and tell people about how the many moments, just me and Sabrina being in a room or making music on Pro Tools and got the microphones, everything, and what she does to me is quite amazing when she's working on vocals, and she'll just sit there and we'll have something going on the computer, usually just musical, and she'll just sit there and like instantly come up with these lyrics and notes and just do it immediately. It's crazy. Whereas for me to write lyrics and melodies, it's quite a chore. So
I think. Thank you, darling, for saying that. And I think that's what makes our music collaboration such a beautiful thing, because Ben has the same thing when it comes to making beat and melodies. So I can't do what he does in that way. So he's just flowing out all these beats and bass lines and programming them down, and then I'm just hearing all these, it's like creating an energy in the music, and the emotion of that just inspires all these words to come out. So it's truly collaborative in that way.
Guys, I was really lucky enough to be out here, actually, Mount Pleasant, out on your out in the area near your property when you guys did the video clip for your first single, Dancing on the Sun. I found that a really spiritual experience. We'll put some links to the video on our socials and stuff like that so people can have a look. But tell me about that video, because I found it very special just to be part of it. So give us a rundown on what it was, what happened, what the concept was, and you know, why, you know, it was such a special moment for you guys.
It was pretty out there. We painted Ben up in all white, much to his dismay on the morning of the video, even though I had mentioned to him, so you're going to wear white underwear, we're going to paint your body white, okay? Are you cool with that? Yeah, if it's going to look good, I'll do it. Great. Come to the morning of the video, I'm like, okay, Ben, here's your white undies. And now go in there, everyone will be here in half an hour. I've just got to paint you white. And he's like, what? That's it? There's nothing else? Hang on. You kind of freaked out in that moment, didn't you?
Yeah, this is true, actually. But I will say that I ended up finding this moment there that was just like, just go with it.
Yeah, you really did surrender. You surrendered to the concept and to the bigger picture, which was really awesome. And basically, Ben was an interdimensional time traveler representing higher self and spirit. And his daughter, Azua, was the other character in the video, and she was sensing him as her higher self intuition and just following through nature where, you know, your highest connection to spirit, I suppose, can happen often in nature. Ben would be coming in through this pyramid that our friend made for us out of bamboo, and he would walk through an area and then disappear, and then his daughter Azua would appear and walk through, following what she felt in her intuition, that she was guided by something, a higher energy. Yeah, and in the end, they come together and unifying, and it has a unity energy to it at the end. Yeah, what do you think?
So beautiful area out here, and you guys have sort of surrounded yourself with nature.
Yes,
and you've surrounded yourself with gardening.
I'd like to say that we are on Gubby Gubby land, and we take great honour to live here and do this work on this land and pay respect to the traditional owners of this land, elders past, present and emerging. You
recently did a horticulture course, I understand. Tell us about that. What does horticulture mean for you? Oh, permaculture, sorry.
Permaculture, yeah.
Give us a rundown.
Permaculture, well, earth care, people care, and fair share is kind of the basis of permaculture. And I suppose it's about living more sustainably and living more in connection with the things you have, your own resources, and trying to work towards replicating the systems that nature already uses to survive, by growing your own food and setting up systems within your own living space, whether that's in the bush or on a farm or in a flat, and finding ways to set up sustainability and support the soil, support the health of your soil, and build on that rather than take it away and contribute to the climate crisis.
So, Ben, you have really immersed yourself in gardening and the gardening practices.
Yeah.
How's that been a benefit for you?
Well, physicality. It's very easy. For example, even just sort of the fact that you're not working, like, you know, you spent your entire life, you know, like working, you know, doing a job, and that in this sort of situation stops. So you don't stop working because we're doing the the gardening stuff and the music stuff. So actually, I'm quite.
It's become kind of like our life's work. It's become more meaningful work. It's like, I remember just this week I pulled out my notes from the permaculture course, and I just, whenever anyone said something that I thought was just beautiful, I was just, all through my book, there's all these little lines, one-liners, and one thing was, everything gardens. I was like, oh, that's beautiful. It's kind of like, now we garden, but you notice the more you garden, then the garden shows you what it's doing, and you learn from the garden, because it's kind of doing its gardening. You know, nature gardens, it's nurture.
Yeah, and like a part of what I was, describing about a little bit earlier was, I use my physicality, like I'm strong and I can push things around, and Sab knows everything, but because of her,
Well, I don't know everything.
but because of her situation with her back, she can't do
very much physically demanding, bending, lifting sorts of things, which, a lot of that involved in gardening.
Yeah, so kind of how we choose, and I don't know. I'm going to have to use how to use each other.
Yeah, it's as you have said before, it's very similar to our collaboration in music. That our collaboration in the garden, we both play to our strengths, and it together we get the job done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I guess we've alluded to it a couple of times over the conversation, but Sabrina, you had a very bad back injury a couple of years ago. Can you quickly describe that?
Yes, I broke my back. I fell off a balcony after going to see a Violent Femmes gig. And I was the Violent Femme. Myself, oh my God. I fell off a balcony. It was terrible. Yeah.
So a lot of this is a big part of your healing journey as well.
Oh, absolutely. So I went on, for 3 years before Ben's diagnosis happened. I broke my back 3 years before that. So I had embarked on a very deep healing journey of my own to repair and understand how the body wants to heal itself and how to support that and work through the things that came up through that experience. It was a horrible experience, but it brought up all these amazing things that I got to learn and evolve and heal from. So, out of the mud, put a seed in the mud, out of the darkness it grows and blooms into a beautiful flower.
Or fruit and vegetables.
Well, edible food.
Yeah, Ben, I just wanted to touch back on I guess, for me, when I had my brain injury, and we sound similar in that I actually really strongly identified with my intellect, and the word finding thing was a big thing for me, and I guess that's how I showed my intellect. So when I guess my brain, after my brain injury, I mourned that loss of that, not understanding that it was about actually developing the other parts of myself, so the emotional and the spiritual side. And that's really when my real recovery began, when I stopped identifying with the intellect and looked at healing, especially for a brain injury, in terms of everything. And of course, they don't really care about that, doctors, as you've touched on before, but that's where my real journey became. So, went on from. So I just wanted to know, for you, how did that go for you in terms of your healing and seeing it as more holistic rather than the actual intellect?
Yeah, the number one thing that typifies the whole experience is the difference between my inner world and just this little thing called word finding, where I am trying to find these little words. But in my own head, if I'm talking to myself, there's absolutely no change, So we're talking about something that, I mean, I can't do it how I used to talk before all this. So it's really, really interesting that it happened to someone who really had quite abilities in this area of talking, and it was part of my work. And
do you think, like what Mel was saying, how having to step away from identifying as your intellect being your superpower, and did that usher you into the healing aspects of your?
no, what I'm sort of more getting to is that really there's virtually no change to my intellect at all. This is just this little thing called word finding. Yeah, that's kind of like.
Do you think you've gone deeper into who you are and the way you live now? Because
I have changed a lot. Gee, I mean, I think that there are conversations that I used to have before this all happened. Like, for example, the issue of the D word, the fact that all of us, including me, at some point are going to die. DIE. The interesting thing is that having been on the other side of this experience, to me, it's really not that big a deal. We're all going to get there one day, but I mean, I have my own experiences and beliefs about whether there is an existence beyond that, and it's my belief. And if you're listening to this and you have a different belief, that's completely fine. But it's my belief and my experience that we go on, and we are little creatures that live one life to learn certain things, and then once that's finished, we are evolving into a new being, and we're going to be somewhere else at a different time. Why I believe that, and I can't prove it, but I have experiences that tell me that that's
I think that's something that kind of we resonate together on, because I had some experiences when I was really young, and then when we became friends, we were like, whoa, that happened to you and you think this? And I was like, yeah, wow, that's what I think too. And we kind of, like, when we were in like the late 90s, early 2000s, and discovering spirit and quantum mechanics.
But I'm not sure if we've actually heretofore explained this situation just very quickly with myself and Sabrina's relationship. Is that we were together in about 2004 until 2006, and then we got back together in 2018 till now. So yes, as you were saying that, I was definitely recognizing that that thing that we share, whether you call it spirituality and how that connects with music. Well, that is definitely a big part of both our experience of living. I think for sure.
So, guys, a big part of our podcast is hope. It's about going through the dark times and finding the lessons and finding the hope. It's been a traumatic time for you the last couple of years, but you seem to have a very positive outlook to things. What's some of the light? Where's the light? What have you sort of learned from this experience?
Well, like Ben was just touching on then, I think the idea that we are limitless, where, infinity is something we can grasp the concept of when it comes to, we know that the edges of the universe are beyond what we even know, feasibly can tell from science. So far as we know, it goes on into infinity. And when you think about that, and the idea of us being a bunch of cells that come together, that we are energy and that space is energy, and that, hang on, we could be limitless. Well, when things get really bloody hard, use all those modalities of breathing, meditation, and everything like that to go, come on, just, this is okay. You're being pushed through this situation so that you can rise above it and learn something and move through it. And this isn't the definition of what your life is going to be. This is just one moment in which to overcome. That's how I try to manage it.
Yeah, I think, we've already done pretty good. As far as I'm concerned, well, in my situation, we have already quite considerably beaten the time that, people that has my little thingy are supposed to already have had worse things to happen. So well, at least my intent is to be here for as long as possible, make some great music and, have some laughs and make some great food.
And especially to find joy in the things that you do each day. And remember that we are living right now, and to be living right now and try and infuse right now with the energy of joy. That's why music and gardening and cooking and painting and creating, they're all things that bring us personally joy. Not to say that anybody else in this situation should do those things to help themselves. Do the things that bring you joy in each moment. That you could, like doing maths, I don't know, crosswords, who knows? But making sure that we, bring an energy of joy and happiness into what we do, even though we don't know what the outcome will be. It's an unknown.
What's your hope for the future?
My hope, well, the only way I can really answer, is that my immediate thought is that I'm just, a small part in this massive continuum, and I want our species to succeed and grow and be a great big good force in the universe, and there to be heaps more of us here to experience that. In my situation, and I think anyone who is in my situation, the way that now makes you look at my species, our world, that I was just strangely born into this weird year, 1976, to look at this world. And I guess, we as a species, we have a lot to achieve. We have a lot to do better. But gee, look at what we get to do. Look at what we got to experience. It's unbelievable, really. That's all I've got is
That's pretty good, Ben.
to have lived, and for it to be as long as possible. Because look, my situation is like this. I could literally be gone in 5 days, or I could still be here in 15 years. That's my situation, and I accept it. I'm going to do the best that I can.
Ben, thanks so much for that. Very powerful words. I think that's a great way for us to end tonight.
Well, I just want to say my hope.
Oh, sorry.
I hope that people believe in the power of love and get to experience it.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Guys.
Thank you so
honestly,
much, Ben and Sabrina.
Thank you. We are so grateful for this opportunity too, to get to talk and share. And so thank you guys for what you do as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to share some notes on our social media pages, on our show notes. You can check some links out to Sabrina, Laurie and Ben Kirschwell. We'll put some links to BAST N MOVE. And if you guys can send us some links around permaculture, and that'd be fantastic. We'd love to share some information on that. We'd love to keep in touch with you guys and see how things are going. We're about to throw to our outro music, same as our intro music, produced and recorded and made by the wonderful Ben Kurzweil. So thanks so much for listening, everyone. Thanks,
Thank
Mel.
you. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Ben. Goodbye, everyone.
Well,